welcome to episode 147 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Jessica Carr,
and John McCamus.
And in today's episode, we'll be talking about movies we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1933's Duck Soup. But let's get into movies that we saw this week. I think all four of us attended the screening of Wonder Woman, the latest.
Not all four of us.
J. Carr slacking.
Okay, I was doing wedding stuff, so I did not get to see Wonder Woman. But
As resident wonderful woman.
Yeah,
This podcast.
yeah.
You're just gonna be the one person.
I know I'm going to go see it with my family tomorrow, so it'll be fine.
Allow us to mansplain Wonder Woman
All
to
right.
you.
Actually, let me do this. Wonder Woman, it's directed by Patty Jenkins, written by Alan Heinberg, and it stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Robin Wright, Connie Nielsen, David Thewlis, Danny Houston. I think those are all the people. Those are all the important names. And this follows the origins of Diana, who's a princess of the Amazons and a trained warrior who joins the fray in World War I after a pilot crashes and tells of that conflict on her home world. So she decides to go and help out and fight a war to end all wars and discover her her full powers and true destiny. Of course, you saw the Wonder Woman character in Batman v Superman, but that was a load of crap, so nobody really wanted to watch that. So now we got this this full-fledged solo movie for Wonder Woman. Yeah. So what do you guys think of it?
Let's go from most tepid response to most enthusiastic response. John?
Oh, yeah, I guess I'm most tepid. I thought it was good. I was with it for a long time, and the third act, I think, is kind of weak, and I ended up kind of being the turning point for how much I liked the movie or not. But I think it's really well done compared to these, like, past... I stopped watching comic book movies, but like past 10 years, we'll say.
What's the last one you saw?
I don't remember. Captain America 2.
Civil War?
Sure. No.
That wasn't that one.
No, that's Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier. Yeah.
Wait, no. Guardians of the Galaxy.
That was the last one you saw.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I don't even remember. But
So
I think...
why do you think this one's better than those?
I don't know if it's better, but it's more of like a ray of sunshine, maybe, in that it felt a lot more genuine and sincere than the others.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot more like humanity to it, even though, like, again, you're dealing with like Greek goddesses and myths and mythology and stuff like that.
Well, it's about the relationship between gods and humans, right?
Yeah. So I related to it on that level, and I enjoyed that story.
As a god.
Yeah. Well, but I think the writing was really good. I enjoyed Diana's story more than like the German stuff. Like I enjoyed
When you're on her Amazon island.
Yeah, her origin story was really well done. And
I definitely could have used a full feature just on that.
Yeah. But it kind of lost me in the last half hour or so. But
And what about that part?
it just seemed. I think the casting was bad for David Thewlis.
Spoilers.
Yeah. You can decide that on your own, listeners, but I was not a fan of Lupin as
Someone.
a guy. And
I'm just gonna plug my ears for this part.
yeah. But I maybe in like a few years I'd give it a rewatch. But I think it's as superhero comic book movies go, it's maybe in the top tier, upper echelon of those kind of things.
Zach, I imagine you mostly agree with that.
Yeah, I guess I'm a lot more. I think I'm a lot more forgiving than he is. I really did enjoy this movie. I think it's I don't think it's a revelation in the comic book movie forum, but I think that it's one of those I would like to see more comic book movies like this, and more movies with this character, because I think you hit a good point where it is this kind of ray of sunshine. It's this very hopeful movie. I think that it's placed in World War One, and I've seen a lot of Wonder Woman comic book people complaining. They're saying that, this is not really, that's not really the origin that's from the comics, and I'm kind of just like, I don't really give a shit, because I think this putting it in World War One is a perfect era, much like putting Captain America's first movie in World War II is perfect, because it gives you some aid with developing, with kind of showing the motivations of the character and kind of developing the character, because you come in with this predetermined view of World War One, and this, especially with that one, it's, you have this cloud of, Steve Trevor, the Chris Pine character, talks about how this, it's the war to end all wars. It's wiping out all of these people, and men, women, and children. And, you have this idea of what to expect with World War One, and kind of the destruction that it brings. And then you add Wonder Woman as a character into it, and Gal Gadot really brings this, this humanity. She's always wanting to do good. She's, when she meets Chris Pine's character, she's not really concerned. She's concerned for too long, what's his purpose? What's he doing here? She immediately hears people are suffering, and she wants to go run, immediately there and fix that. And there's something kind of admirable about that. And I think giving it this World War One setting allows you to, latch on just to that and not have to worry about doing too much setup behind it. And I think that's really the thing, the big takeaway I had in general with Wonder Woman is it does a perfect job of setting up but not setting up, because it's one of those, I feel like a tendency with a lot of these comic book superhero movies lately is that it's always looking toward the future, and this movie alludes to it takes place in the present day for the first 3-4 minutes at the beginning and 3-4 minutes at the end, but in between that it's giving you this kind of standalone story that's not connected to Batman or Superman or whatever. It's just this character in this world and what she's dealing with. And I think that's what I want to see more in these comic book movies. Just stop worrying about what's happening next and just let's focus on the hero that's on the poster. And I thought that Wonder Woman does that spectacularly.
There's no stinger at the end of the credits too, which was just such a relief to not. Yeah. I guess DC movies don't do that as often or at all compared to Marvel movies, but I haven't seen enough of those to know exactly.
I have no idea.
Like John, I stopped watching these things in theaters around the time the first Avengers came out, though I've seen 4 or 5 on DVD since then. I also liked the World War I setting. Even though Wonder Woman is traditionally a World War II character, I think that the way they do this narrative, it makes a lot more sense with World War I, because it's about Wonder Woman wanting to kill one bad guy and fix all the problems of the world, right? And World War II has much more of an obvious bad guy figure, right, with Adolf Hitler. World War I is a messy war. It's a really violent war. There is no one bad guy. And a lot of the arc of that character is learning that there is no way to fix the world by killing one antagonist. And that's kind of an interesting way to approach a superhero story, I thought, kind of a subversive way to do that. And also you have just as you were saying, Zach, you have immediate stakes when you put this character in actual world history. It's not like they're chasing some sort of MacGuffin, like they have to have the crystals or they have to have the cube or all these technobabble things that don't actually matter in our world, and these superhero movies don't really do a great job of selling those things to us. There's a lot more emotional intensity, I think, to Wonder Woman. And I've seen this movie described, or specifically the third act of this movie described as cheesy or cliche or corny by a lot of people. And that tends to be where it loses them. And I, surprisingly enough, really enjoyed the third act for how by the numbers it really was. Like, it felt like it was trying to hit all the traditional plot beats of a superhero film. You have like the big epic showdown and people like flinging vast cosmic power at each other, and you have somebody screaming no and then looking out into the horizon and jumping into the sunset and credits rolling. And what the vibe that I got, and you guys have already heard this spiel a billion times since we saw this movie together, is that Wonder Woman seems to be trying to clean the slate of like all the other superhero movies that come out in the last 10 years or so and just go back to basics. It's trying to be this like platonic ideal of like, here's what the genre is and this is what it can be if we do it right. So if we're going to tell these stories this way, we might as well tell them this well, right? And I've since gone back and listened to interviews with Gal Gadot and read interviews with Patty Jenkins, and both of them really emphasize how much they wanted this to be like a sincere take on the superhero genre, where there's no like crazy irony or cynicism or jokiness tacked onto it. It is just the traditional narrative done with respect, done with love, done with sincerity, and done with a lot of like really dazzling visual style as well. It's a really nice film to look at, and I was surprised by how much I liked it, despite the fact that I was really looking forward to it. And I will definitely see another movie starring Wonder Woman in the future, especially if they go back to the Amazon island. But I'm not really looking forward to them trying to wedge this story into the DC extended universe of Zack Snyder, dour, morbid, awful bleakness.
Wait. Yeah. Justice League.
Well, I will add, today there was some news talking about Justice League in its reshoots, and they confirmed that Connie Nielsen and Robin Wright will have a role in Justice League, that they're going to integrate that whole Amazon thing into Justice League. And they also, I think that with them going into reshoots and doing all that kind of stuff, and with the success of Wonder Woman, I would think the amount that we see her in kind of her role in the movie is gonna probably increase, just because this movie's been super successful. I'm gonna assume that now that they're going into reshoots, that she's gonna have a much bigger role in that movie, because people have clearly said that we want more of that character. So
also looking forward to James Wan's Aquaman film, which is gonna lead into that Justice League film. But the whole team up movie with cinematic universes where every character gets like 5 to 10 total minutes of screen time just does not work for me. As somebody who's watched 2 Avengers movies in the last week or so, it's just headache inducing. So I'm looking forward to what they do with this character, but also dreading it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, another new release that came out this past week is Captain Underpants, the first epic movie.
That's what you really want to talk about.
Yes. Okay. So speaking of superhero movies, I had a chance to see Captain Underpants, which I definitely got made fun of by, the person at the movie theater, because they're like, have you seen Wonder Woman yet? And I was like, no, but I would like 2 tickets to see Captain Underpants, please.
We saw the grown-ass woman movie. You saw the 5-year-old boy movie.
Exactly. Anyways, it's a computer animated movie, and it follows George and Harold, which they're like the cutest, best friends ever, and they meet in elementary school, and they spend tons of time in their treehouse creating comic books, and one of the characters that they create is Captain Underpants. They're pranksters, and they love, just like playing pranks on people, and they hate their principal, and they get in trouble, and pretty much he threatens to put them in separate classes, and so they kind of like trap him in his office, and they hypnotize him to be Captain Underpants. So I like this movie because I feel like it's very self-aware. It knows what its source material is, because this is based off of a book, which I actually read when I was in school. Right. And it's a comic book, but the movie breaks the fourth wall a lot. You have George and Harold kind of addressing the audience, but it knows who its audience is. It knows that it is targeted for
Jessica Carr.
No, for boys who love just like toilet humor and like there's stop groaning. I feel like I have to defend this movie. But like it breaks up the animation style a couple of times. There's a part where George and Harold are realizing like if they do separate, then they're not going to be friends anymore. And they're like, visualization is them being sock puppets and just talking to each other as sock puppets. And it's really cool. And I don't know. I liked how silly it was. My one critique is I wish that it had a little bit more character development. Because, like, I feel like with the principal, he was obviously a very sad character. And when he turned into Captain Underpants, like, he was confident. And he was able to, like, he had a crush on the lunch lady. Who was voiced by Kristen Shaw. Like, I feel like the voice cast is also really cool. Because you have Kevin Hart, Ed Helms, Nick Kroll, Thomas Middleditch, and Jordan Peele, and Kristen Shaw that are in it. And I think that people need to give this movie a chance because it's silly and it's fun and it's something that we need that's lighthearted.
Nathan gave it a chance and said that he thought it was super boring. Do you see that critique at all?
I don't think that it's boring, but I don't think that it's super memorable. Like I said with the character development, because when I think of an animated movie like Inside Out and how developed the emotions were, like I think that that's really awesome. But when I think of this, there aren't standout characters.
Right.
They all kind of just blend together. So my one thing is that I wish there was more character development.
Professor Poopy Pants doesn't stand out?
He is a classic villain.
Okay.
Like, definitely.
Like, how do you not write a good Professor Poopy Pants?
I know, man. But I thought it was really sweet because, like, this is a 10-year-old boy's Twilight. Like, he is coming to this movie, like, he read all the books, and him and his friends, I'm serious.
Yes, that's great.
Like, him and his friends get together, and they come to this movie, they're excited, and there were discussion circles at the end of my screening that I went to. Like, they were like, oh, did you see when they did that? Oh, this was different from the book. And I just think that's really cool that they have a movie like that.
Though, don't 10-year-old boys get a Twilight like every week? Kind of.
I don't know. I'm talking about nerdy 10-year-old boys.
Okay.
This is a very specific audience that I'm talking about.
I'm sorry you got stuck in just a very, very, well, not very, very, but pretty pretentious little circle there, Jessica. It sounds kind of silly. It sounds silly. It sounds like it's exactly what you would expect from Captain Underpants, the first epic movie.
We need to get some of those kids on the podcast.
I know. I'm sitting here defending Captain Underpants. Y'all are shooting me down.
I'm not going to see it. Sorry.
The animation stuff. What's the studio? Who did it?
DreamWorks.
Oh, yeah. They're not usually good.
No. They're making like 3 more after this. I don't know, 2 or 3 more.
John's had like a 9-month absence from the podcast. He's been making his second independent animated film for anybody who is not in the loop.
Yeah.
So the DreamWorks hate runs deep.
It probably could. It probably could have used some more potty humor, honestly, judging from the reception of Captain Underpants.
You can't see the face that John's making right now, but rest assured.
All right.
It just makes me sick that a studio would make money off of potty humor.
All right, film snubs. That's fine. Whatever.
I'm not surprised that a studio would make money off of potty.
That's why it makes me sick, because that's all studios do. But okay, we're in the...
I don't understand how it's okay to like go see a movie about a baby being the boss and like, but it's not okay to like
Also
watch
DreamWorks.
something like Captain Underpants. Because me talking to other people and being like, yeah, I saw Captain Underpants, like they are just like, ugh, gross. Why would you do that? But they saw Boss Baby like last week. So like,
Boss Baby also doesn't appeal to me.
I
That's what I'm
don't
saying.
understand.
DreamWorks makes their movies for one demographic.
Well, and honestly, I'd rather watch Captain Underpants than have to watch Good Dinosaur again. That was a load of shit. So there we go.
I think I agree with that statement. I would much rather watch Captain Underpants than watch Good Dinosaur again.
All right, John. So since you're on a high horse,
Oh boy.
He's going to tell us about some serious art cinema. John, let's talk about some serious art.
everybody get your monocles on. Let's go.
Put away your poopy pants.
Put away your poopy pants.
Terrible people.
We're big adults now. All right, talk
Okay.
about the pawnbroker.
Yeah, so I recently read Sidney Lumet's Making Movies book, which for anyone that's interested in making film needs to read this book. And Sidney Lumet's directorial debut was 12 Angry Men, which is like
Serious art cinema.
a pillar of American cinema. I'm like working my way through some of his lesser known films, and The Pawnbroker is what I saw recently, and it's about Saul Nazarman. This movie's 1960, I think, by the way. And so Saul Nazarman is a survivor of the concentration camps.
Went straight to the Holocaust, John.
Yeah.
Straight to the Holocaust.
And so he's a survivor of World War II, a Jewish immigrant in, I think, Harlem. He has a pawn shop in Harlem. And he is approaching like the fourth year, or maybe it's like in 20 years later. It's in real time, so it's set in the 60s, 20-year anniversary of when he was released. And he starts having like flashbacks of his time in the concentration camp. And that's really where this movie stands out from a lot of Lumet's work, I found, is the editing. The editing is so innovative and very experimental for like what a studio would release in the 60s. The movie concerns itself a lot with like memory. And so Nazarman will be like looking at an object or a person, and he'll start to have flashbacks about his time in World War II, and the way Lumet and his editor show you what Saul Nazarman is thinking is they'll cut in like 3 frames of Nazarman's thought, and then go back to the present, and then wait a little longer, and then cut in about 5 frames, and so you get very quick visuals of what is going on in Nazarman's head, and eventually it kind of strobes, and then you're in his memory. And it's just really well done and really, really amazing acting. Rod Steiger is the lead, and I think he got nominated for an Oscar for it. And it's very, very worthy performance. If you're a fan of Lumet's work of 12 Angry Men, this would be a great feature to see in addition to that.
And as Carol Morley, director of The Falling, has stated about like inserting subliminal images into films, like you need 3 frames for the human eye to even register that they've seen an image. But anything more than that, anything less than that, it just passes right over.
Right.
So if you would if listeners could kind of imagine like just getting the tiniest glimpse, thing like, did I just see something?
Blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually, Lumet writes in his book that that's the kind of the springboard for subliminal messaging in advertising.
Yeah.
And he kind of apologizes to the readers for kind of inventing that kind of editing style and contributing to the corporate ad world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which went on to inspire a lot of horror stuff.
Sure.
Like William Friedkin uses it in The Exorcist, and
sure.
Stanley Kubrick uses it in The Shining. So an appropriate usage here to talk about the horrors of war and the Holocaust.
Pawnbroker was a great kind of influencer for a lot of later directors and films, for sure.
Let's talk about some more serious art cinema.
Yeah,
John.
man.
Let's
I'm
talk
also
about some Ozu.
Walking through some Ozu films, which are traditionally very melodramatic, but also very beautifully shot and acted. And
can I just mention though that there is an Ozu film where he bases the whole thing on a fart joke, so let's not get above ourselves.
That's true. Yeah,
Those studios and their potty humor, they should feel ashamed of them.
How did we circle back to that?
Boy.
I just wanted to say that, like, the crux of Good Morning is these kids making fart jokes, but that's fine.
I think that Good Morning is going to be the Ozu film that I respond to the most.
Because of the fart jokes?
Possibly because of the fart jokes.
They're wonderful. They're really, because the dad keeps the dad farts too. It's hilarious, honestly.
Oh, God.
I'm not knocking it. It's wonderful.
Farts.
Yeah,
It
I didn't
is.
watch
It's
this
great.
movie. I haven't seen this one yet. But I saw Late Spring and Early Summer, which are part of his what's called the Noriko trilogy.
Setsuko Hara.
Yeah.
You were describing this trilogy to me, and it makes no goddamn sense.
It's weird. Yeah. It's the crux of at least Late Spring and Early Summer. Tokyo Story is the last of this trilogy, and it doesn't really relate to the first two except for the character name. But Late Spring and Early Summer are essentially the same plot with the same characters, but not necessarily the same actors. And so Late Spring is about...
Welcome to Ozu.
Is what?
Welcome to Ozu.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all Ozu.
Yeah. So the plot of each film is about Noriko, who is 28 in both films. She's single, and she is encouraged and eventually forced by her friends and family to marry because the women need a man, and otherwise hell breaks loose. So it's I don't know, Zach, maybe you can help me out because you've seen both of them, but
yes,
they're both really well shot. You get a really good sense of how this family lives in this house in both movies. And
well, I guess here this is the best way to distinguish the two. Late Spring, the Noriko character is living with her widowed father. They're kind of building up marriage and saying that she needs to get married and go move on with her life, but she's completely happy just staying at home and caring for her father, who's played by Chishu Ryu, who also is featured in the 3 movies. And then in Early Summer, she is just part of a larger family that is all there living together, and they decide, she needs to get married and move on. But instead of getting married to who they want, she decides to marry a friend of hers and goes and does everything that they want, but with the person they didn't want. So
they're both very big family dramas and kind of more melodramatic, very, very plot based and kind of slower films. But compared to like Tokyo Story, which was the first Ozu that I'd seen before these, they're more upbeat and light. Tokyo Story is very, it's a downer at the end.
Did you watch that for the first time for our Young Critics Watch Old Movie series last year?
Yeah.
So people can go back and listen to
Yeah, man.
Here's the
circle back.
Full circle.
Yeah, me and John are on that episode.
Yeah. Boom. You're welcome.
That's a good episode, too.
It is a great episode. Mm-hmm. I'm on it.
Throwback.
But yeah, anyway, that's what I've been working through. I'm unemployed right now, so watching a bunch of movies.
I was going to say, if you had a happy week.
No.
I'd like to add on both of these. I've been watching a lot of Ozu lately, and I've become... the one thing that I take away with his films first is just kind of the geography of the movies. Good Morning is a little different because it does spread out a little bit more over multiple houses and other places, but with Late Spring, there's a large focus on the kind of the setup of the house. Ozu loves to kind of give you this long shot. There's stuff in the foreground and the background. The house kind of is not adherent to the camera. The camera just kind of sits there and they move around the house like somebody normally would, and then they'll cut around and you'll see, you kind of are used to seeing 2 to 3 different shot structures, but different stuff happens in each time, and I just love kind of how he frames that, where you kind of develop this familiarity with the house and who's in the house and who moves around the house. And I think that's kind of where the emotional weight at the end comes, because in both Late Spring and Early Summer, the Noriko character leaves and is married off, and so there's really just this kind of sadness and melancholy as the parents kind of reflect on their newfound loneliness, especially in Late Spring. The Chishu Ryu character is by himself now, but he kind of manipulated to get her married because he just felt like she needed that he was kind of holding her back in life, and he needed to allow her to go, and he kind of talks about that. And then in early summer, it's really sad because the parents move far away, and the mom has this kind of speech where she's talking to the uncle and the dad, and about how now for this, it's about, what is it, like 2 hours long for this, for pretty much an hour and 45 minutes to an hour 50 minutes of this movie, you've had all of these characters together, and then in the last 10 minutes she's realizing that they're all in different places doing different stuff, and it's not going to be the same anymore. And I think that's kind of where the emotional weight comes, is that he sets you up in this space, and he shows you all of these moving parts and all of these people and all of their desires and all their, all of these different things. And then in the end, he just kind of lets them all loose, and you're left with one or two faces. And I think that it's great at causing some introspection and kind of how you feel in a situation like that, as well as some empathy for these characters who they're now facing this kind of latter end of their life, and it's a lot different, and they're happy for their children and the other people involved, that they're moving on with their life and they're doing something new, but at the same time you kind of lose that familiarity, you lose that comfort, and I think that's kind of where a lot of the emotions at the end kind of hit you, is just that that realization along with the characters.
We've come a long way from Captain Underpants, people.
Yeah, I had to turn it around. turn it towards the art.
I mean, I think you get the same thing, Captain Underpants.
Let's turn
honestly,
all the way back in the other direction with Duck Soup. In part 2,
baby.
Yeah.
So let's we're gonna take a short break. Then we're gonna get into some Marx Brothers comedy in part 2 with Duck Soup.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company, and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
It's war! And it's war! Gather the forces! Harness the horses! It's war! Fredonia's gone to war. Each native son will grab a gun and run away to war. At last we're going to meet along the streets of war. At last the country's going to war. You see, the country's going to war. At last the country's going to war. We're going to war. This is a fact we can't ignore. We're going to war. This is a fact we can't ignore. We're going to war. In case you haven't heard before, I think they think we're going to war. I think they think we're going to war.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 147 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1933's Duck Soup. It's directed by Leo McCarey with a script by Burt Kalmer and Harry Ruby. And the film starred the Marx Brothers along with Margaret Dumont, Louis Colhern, Raquel Torres, and Edgar Kennedy. It was the final Marx Brothers film to feature Zeppo, who retired from acting after this movie and became an agent.
If I didn't know it was a Marx Brother, I don't think I would have thought was a Marx Brother from watching.
No, he's kind of hidden compared to the others. The film is about. I read Ebert's review before doing this, and he in his review he's like. He talks about, kind of explain the plot is not really worth anything, but here it goes. When the tiny nation of Fredonia goes bankrupt, its wealthy benefactor, Mrs. Teasdale, insists that the wacky Rufus T. Firefly, played by Groucho Marx, becomes the country's president. Sensing a weakness in leadership, the bordering nation of Sylvania sends in the spies Pinky, played by Harpo, and Ciccolini, played by Chico Marx, to set the stage for a revolution. As Firefly clashes with the Sylvanian ambassador, plenty of mayhem ensues and the country's verge on an all-out war. Compared to the Marx Brothers' previous Paramount films, Duck Soup was a box office disappointment, although it was not a flop as it is sometimes reported. The film opened to mixed reviews, although this by itself did not end the group's business with Paramount. Bitter contract disputes, including a threatened walkout by the brothers, crippled relationships between them and Paramount just as Duck Soup went into production. After the film fulfilled their 5-picture contract with the studio, the Marxes and Paramount agreed to part ways. One possible reason for the film's lukewarm response is that it was released during the Great Depression. Audiences were taken aback by such preposterous political disregard, buffoonery, and cynicism at a time of economic and political crisis. Most critics at the time disliked it because of its, quote, dated look at politics. Some modern critics are also unimpressed. Christopher Noll believes, quote, the send-up of Mussolini types doesn't quite pan out. Take the comedy, leave the story. Even Groucho himself did not initially think too highly of the film. When asked of the significance of the film's politics, Groucho only shrugged and said, quote, what significance? We were just 4 Jews trying to get a laugh.
He also refused to explain the title, too. So that's
I will. I got that in. Do you want to trust me to do my notes?
No, you're good. I was just commenting on your notes.
Okay. Nevertheless, the brothers were ecstatic when Benito Mussolini took the film as a personal insult and banned it in Italy. Also, the residents of Fredonia, New York, protested because they feared that the similar-sounding nation would hurt their city's reputation. The Marx Brothers took the opposite approach, telling them to change the name of their town to keep from hurting their movie. In the movie, there is one of the more famous scenes is the mirror scene. In this scene, Pinky, dressed as Firefly, pretends to be Firefly's reflection in a missing mirror, matching his every move, including absurd ones that begin out of sight to near perfection. In one particularly surreal moment, the two men swap positions, and thus the idea of which is a reflection of the other. Eventually, into their misfortune, Ciccolini, also disguised as Firefly, enters the frame and collides with both of them. Although its appearance in Duck Soup is the best known instance, the concept of the mirror did not originate in this film. Max Linder included it in 7 Years Bad Luck in 1921, where a man's servants have accidentally broken a mirror in an attempt to hide the fact by imitating his actions in the mirror's frame. Charlie Chaplin used a similar joke in 1916's The Floor Walker, though it did not involve a mirror. The scene has also been imitated many times, including in a Bugs Bunny cartoon, Hair Tonic, the Mickey Mouse cartoon, Lonesome Ghost, The Square Peg, in the movie The Square Peg, in the movie The Pink Panther, and in Big Business. Harpo himself did a reprise of this scene dressed in his usual costume, with Lucille Ball also donning the fright wig and trench coat in the I Love Lucy episode Lucy and Harpo Marx. The climactic production number ridicules war by comparing nationalism to a minstrel show. One segment is a variant on the old spiritual song All God's Chillin' Got Wings, and was reportedly considered for deletion for the film's DVD release for fear of offending African Americans. Shortly after, during the final battle sequences, quote, rightfully called the funniest of cinema, Firefly can be seen wearing a different costume in almost every sequence until the end of the film, including American Civil War uniforms, first the Union and then the Confederate, a British Palace Guard uniform, a Boy Scout Scoutmaster's uniform, and even a Davy Crockett coonskin cap. Meanwhile, the exterior view of the building they are occupying changes appearances from a bunker to an old fort, etc. Firefly assures his generals that he has, quote, a man out combing the countryside for volunteers. Sure enough, Pinky is wandering out on the front lines wearing a sandwich board sign reading, quote, join the army and see the Navy. Later, Ciccolini volunteers Pinky to carry a message through enemy lines, and Firefly tells him, quote, and remember, while you're out there risking life and limb through shot and shell, we'll all be in here thinking what a sucker you are. Thomas Doherty has described this line as, quote, summing up the Great War cynicism toward all things patriotic. The melodramatic exclamation, quote, this means war, certainly did not originate with Duck Soup, but it was used several times in that movie, at least twice by Trentino and once by Firefly, and would be repeated by Groucho in A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races. Variations of this phrase would later become a frequently used catchphrase for Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny in Warner Brothers cartoons. In another scene, the film pokes fun at the Hays Code. Due to the code, a man and woman could not be shown in bed together. The camera begins the scene in a woman's bedroom, panning across the foot of the bed. A pair of men's shoes are shown on the floor, then a pair of women's shoes are shown on the floor, and then 4 horseshoes. The camera cuts to a shot of the entire room, with Pinky sleeping in one bed with the horse while the woman is in another bed.
I was hoping you would give me an explanation of what was going on in that scene, Zach.
Yes. Initially, before the movie, the film that would later become Duck Soup. Initially, the Marx Brothers wanted to make a movie following their previous one, and they were going to have Ernst Lubitsch direct it, which sounds interesting. Leo McCarey came up with the idea for the title the title Duck Soup from some of his Laurel and Hardy films, including Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, and Horse Feathers. Duck Soup was American English slang at that time. It meant something easy to do. Conversely, to duck something meant to avoid it. When Groucho was asked for an explanation of the title, he quipped, quote, "Take 2 turkeys, 1 goose, 4 cabbages, but no duck, and mix them together. After one taste, you'll duck soup for the rest of your life." In 2000, Roger Ebert said about the movie, "The Marx Brothers created a body of work in which individual films are like slices from the whole, but Duck Soup is probably the best." All right. On that note, what was kind of your takeaway from Duck Soup? Let's stick to the cinema stuff first, and then we can bring up your obvious Donald Trump and connections later.
We had a quote, right? We had a listener send us in a quote from Mark Twain about comedy, and suggested we watch some Marx Brothers and talk about that. Do you have a copy of the quote in front of you, Zach?
It says, quote, "Humor must not professedly teach, and it must not professedly preach, but it must do both if it would live forever. By forever, I mean 30 years. The very things it preaches about, and which are novelties when it preaches about them, can cease to be novelties and become commonplaces in 30 years.
So here we are about 90 years away from Duck Soup. Almost 90 years away from Duck Soup. Do we feel like it has aged well? Is it still funny? Is it still instructive in some way? What do you guys think?
Let me think about that.
I think it's still funny. There were just some times where I feel like it's like rapid fire humor.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the stuff kind of went over my head. A lot of the slapstick comedy, like I definitely got that, but like some of Groucho Marx's like lines, like I didn't catch a lot of it.
Puns on puns on puns.
Yeah,
right?
I felt like it was a lot, and I should have watched it with subtitles to understand all of that.
We watched it with subtitles, and that was a good decision.
Yeah.
And I still think that because there are so many jokes, sometimes it feels just like a series of jokes as opposed to a narrative with characters, right? And I think that how much this movie is going to work for you is determined by what percentage of the jokes land with you.
Yeah.
Because half of them might land and then the other half might just completely not.
Groucho just like throws out a net, like in rapid fire, and see what kind of what he can catch from the audience. I thought a lot of the visual comedy was still very good. That bit with the hats. Man, I thought that was so good. I even thought it went on a little too long, but even then I was like, this is
there are a lot of scenes where
comedy.
It just feels like they're trying to see how far they can stretch it out. Like the hat scene
mirror,
and the mirror
hat.
scene.
Oh man.
And like the war song at the end, like I expected that to end 2 or 3 times before it ever actually did, but it kept like having this culminating momentum to it that was just like overwhelmingly funny to me at a certain point.
Yeah.
Like I was not thinking about the line that might have been offensive to African Americans because I was just like kind of bowled over by how ridiculous the song had already gotten, right?
Right.
And I didn't even catch that until you mentioned it, so...
I mean, it's just he kind of takes on a Negro dialect for a second, you know? Whether or not it's disrespectful... what do you think, John?
Oh, this is the song. This isn't the line.
Not the line that is obviously racist.
Right.
There is an obviously racist line earlier on in the film.
No, I'll just the line. It the song. It goes. They got guns. We got guns. All God's chillin' got guns. I'm gonna walk all over the battlefield because all God's chillin' got guns. He just takes out the words and
of a spiritual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's mocking politics more than it's mocking
Sure.
the Negro spiritual.
Sure.
Right.
Especially when you're singing this giant musical about
Right.
mass destruction and weaponry. And
It's like Kubrick ending with "We'll meet again
Right.
some sunny day." Right.
Right.
But the line, the super racist line that you can't avoid. Do you remember what that one was, John?
I don't want to.
You don't want to?
Well, I don't want to misquote it.
You want to type it and I'll say it
because it's I don't want to misquote it.
It's something about
be wrong.
Headstrong and Armstrong having a child, and like that's where the word they use as darkies come from. And like it's in very poor taste.
Yeah.
Right? But it's in a collection of like 50 other jokes.
Right.
That again he's just throwing out there to see if they land. And if that one misses you, like Jessica, you didn't even notice it was in there, right?
No, I did not.
Yeah. But I think with subtitles we caught it.
Yeah.
And we
were
both
like,
looked at
"What?"
each other. We were like, where did that go?
we got you. We
And
got
it
you,
doesn't serve a
Groucho.
purpose
No.
in the narrative at all. It's just like a racist thing taking up space in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think comedies of this era, I always compare, maybe unfairly, to Chaplin. Because Chaplin's City Lights came out 2 years before Duck Soup. Mm-hmm. And you watch City Lights today, and the comedy is as strong as it was back then. And it's as heartfelt as it was back then. And, of course, this one is not meant... Duck Soup's not meant to be heartfelt. It is pure farce and satire of war and politicians.
I think Chaplin maybe starts with character and starts with ideas.
He is concerned with pathos.
The Marx Brothers seem to start with jokes.
Yeah.
They start with lines and see how they can string them together.
And then they add props and you know, like Pinky's scissors.
Yeah.
It's just this constant running gag throughout which is great.
That was great. Pinky
It's
is
great.
my favorite.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. Harpo was the best.
I love whenever they like introduce them because they're these two spies, like Pinky and Ciccolini.
Yeah.
And like whenever that guy opens the office door and like you see this guy with like a beard and glasses, and then he turns around and it's Pinky, and you're like, oh my god.
And he's wearing like the Sherlock Holmes hat, but it's sideways and
Yeah.
like the flaps. It's
some
great.
of Pinky's just interactions with random people, just like antagonizing, kicking people, and like, jumping in the lemonade. Some of that didn't work for me, but anytime Pinky was like trying to straight up communicate with another person without using words, like when he answers
With
the
his
phone
horn?
and he's like using a little like womp womp voice.
Oh, it's so good.
That was great. To go back to your point, John, about Chaplin, you are planning a video essay for Cemetery about how Chaplin's language of humor has kind of been adopted by animation, right?
Yeah.
And watching this movie made me really realize how little Chaplin's technique has been carried on by live-action comedy films. I think that the Marx Brothers have been much more influential, actually, because I was just thinking about so many other comedians and comedy troupes while I was watching this movie, like people who were just straight up riffing on the Marx Brothers. So I was thinking about Woody Allen. I was thinking about Monty Python. I was thinking about Sacha Baron Cohen. I was thinking about, what was the other one? There's another like really obvious reference point that I'm blanking on right now. But the difference for me is that...
Did you say Monty?
I already said Monty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Chaplin's stuff doesn't really seem to age, like you said. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of these other comedians have taken the Marx Brothers style and kind of improved upon it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Woody Allen can be Groucho Marx, but also be a character in a story.
Yeah.
Right? And Monty Python can make that ridiculous, farcical thing have some sort of, I don't know, either deeper purpose or contextual...
richer meaning.
Yeah, some sort of richness to it. Whereas here, I think it relies on the strength of the individual jokes. How much does each individual joke work for you? But then we can, of course, get into some of the political satire, if we're going to say there's political satire in this movie, and whether or not that holds up almost 90 years later. I would say that it does, but
I think Duck Soup just relies so much on the dialogue, whereas Chaplin was born from pantomime. Animation too. Animation and Chaplin both born out of pantomime, and so that's where the strong visual comedy comes from. Here is all dialogue. It's all jokes for the most part. You have a little bit of, you know, kind of visual gags with Pinky and Ciccolini, but I think that's probably the big difference between those two kind of comedic styles, for sure.
What do you think, Zach? You've been pretty quiet so far.
I think it's kind of tough to. I think you hit on it, but I think it's kind of tough to compare Chaplin and the Marx Brothers, because that's kind of. I don't know. It's kind of they're both comedians, but they're trying to do different things. Kind of Chaplin is much more, like you said, built on pantomiming, but I think there's also something incredibly impressive about watching Groucho Marx just shoot those jokes out. The thing about Duck Soup that impressed me, and Ebert talks about it in his review, is that it's less. I mean, there's a story, there's a through line kind of going around, but really it's just these. It kind of works as almost these little small slices. I kind of think of them. It reminds me a lot of how they like structure episodes of the TV show Portlandia, where it's these kind of bizarre, crazy characters, and there's a little bit of a through line going, but it's mainly just these little small slices that have moments, and then they move on to the next slice. And Duck Soup is structured that way, where you have these actors who are like presenting the story and trying to do this very, somewhat serious, the serious narrative about this country being bankrupt and needing to find new leadership, and then you have this other country that's kind of trying to jump in on that country's weakness and use it for their advantage, and then you have just the Marx Brothers just disrupting that completely. And I love that whenever Rufus D. Firefly shows up, you do have those rapid fire lines, but that works because it just completely discombobulates whatever you were doing. It's just him shooting line after line after line. And then Harpo and Chico have the same effect, where they show up and they show up at the little stand where they're selling the peanuts and lemonade and such, and they're just doing something, like they're just constantly doing something. And the Edgar Kennedy character is really funny because he has probably the most patient person I've ever seen in my life, because he's just taking that and not like completely just wanting to, like, I feel like if you were doing that today, it would become like there would become some shootout or something, because some redneck would pull out a shotgun and that'd be the end of it. But it's just that it's something happening over and over and over again. He's clipping something, he's kicking something, they're saying something, they're bopping something. There's just something always happening, and it just I think that the movie works as just this. You have this kind of thin story that's constantly being interrupted by these. By these disruptors. It's kind of. It kind of reminds me of almost this schoolhouse humor, where the teacher's trying to teach something, but every time they say something, there's some kid interrupting, but the kid has the comedic wit of Groucho Marx, so it works.
Summer vacation, Zach. Stop trying to give me PTSD right now.
But yeah. That's how I think that this movie works. I think that the rapid fire is a little, you don't catch everything necessarily, but when they land, there's some he does have some great lines, and Groucho Marx is heralded just as one of the great comedians to with kind of give or take. Somebody will say something, he can immediately come up with this this expertly witty phrase back at him. I'm trying to, like, you have the one that when he's talking with Mrs. Teasdale and he says, "Not that I care, but where's your husband? Why, he's dead." I bet he's just using that as an excuse. "I was with him to the very end. No wonder he passed away. I held him in my arms and kissed him." "Oh, I see then. Then it was murder. Will you marry me? Did he leave you any money? Answer the second question first. He left his entire fortune. Is that so? Can't you see what I'm trying to tell you? I love you." Like, it just, he has that, like, it's just that there's something, there's a story there, but he's constantly disrupting whatever sort of narrative you could have with just sarcasm and wit. And I kind of like this. It was never. It's like the Marx Brothers were never gonna let it be something. It was never gonna let it be something. They were constantly gonna be poking at it and prodding at it like they did to all the other characters.
And did anybody find that kind of exhausting though? Because
it's pretty exhausting.
I wasn't there the whole time. My favorite is just the visual gags.
Oh yeah.
Because I can get that instantly, but like the rest of it, I just felt like the lines were getting kind of exhausting. I did watch this very late at night also, which probably didn't help.
No, I can understand why you would think that way.
It's only 70 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? But it feels a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Because it is so like...
And it's kind of like Groucho is in a different movie than all the other people in the movie, right? It's like he keeps saying these like really insulting, cruel things to people, and nobody really responds the way they would if they were faced with that in the real world. Right?
Yeah.
They just like continue forward as though what Groucho is doing is completely normal, which I guess gets into some of the political commentary of the.
I think that also just goes back to what I was saying. Like, I don't think they can keep up with all of that he's saying.
Yeah.
Like, at one point he's insulting Mrs. Teasdale, but then he's insulting the ambassador. Then he's insulting you can't. It doesn't give him enough time to be like, "Hey, why did you say that?" Because he's hitting everybody all at the same time.
They also don't even
stop
have time
to
to scratch
really
their
process
head and figure out what it is he's saying. It's like they're not listening to him at all.
The other characters are kind of like us, the audience. It's going way past them.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like he's on to the next thing. He's not, what he said to her, it's not lasting. He's already saying something to that guy. Like, it's going so quickly they can't keep up either.
What did you guys think about the musical numbers? I was not expecting there to be songs in this movie, and I really liked all three of them.
Yeah, I was thrown, but I was in it, man. I was going along for the ride, and I think they're really well done. I mean, they're like musical numbers making fun of musical numbers that are making fun of politics. That, it's a really kind of smart way to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
The first one of the national anthem introducing Groucho's character, and like he just continues to not show up, really felt like a Monty Python sketch to me.
Yeah.
Like, and we're gonna start the song over now, Right. But I think the best one for me is definitely the final war sequence, just how ridiculous it ends up getting, how over the top everyone is just like swaying in like this seance by the end of it. But while doing research on this movie, we came across an interesting Slate article called "What the Marx Brothers Duck Soup Can Teach Us About Trump," and I wanted to read a couple of quick quotes from it that maybe spark some conversation.
It'll spark something.
We have the author, whose name is Luke Eplin. He says,
Luke. All right.
Like Firefly, Groucho's a non-politician who's unable to conform... like Firefly, Trump is a non-politician who's unable to conform to presidential standards of solemnity and competence. Both dismiss the advice of establishment figures, are too distracted with personal grievances to delve into policy details, and have checkered histories of reneging on promised payments. That's quote number one. Quote number two. The most obvious overlap between Trump and Firefly comes from their pathological compulsion to belittle any perceived rivals and then refuse to apologize or back down. Whether it's slapping an ambassador or berating the parents of a fallen soldier, they consistently favor entrenchment over contrition, even when presented with opportunities to right the course. Their outsized, deeply rooted personas render them seemingly incapable of restraining their destructive impulses. And I was thinking about this in the scene near the end when they were talking about coming to some sort of peace treaty, and Groucho is thinking out loud of the hypothetical situation of what if the other guy won't shake my hand, And then he just like gets so wrapped up in that possibility that when the guy shows up, he's like, "You won't shake my hand, will you?" and slaps him. And this reminded me of Trump's meeting with Angela Merkel a couple of months ago when Angela Merkel has her hand outstretched to shake Trump's and he just like continually ignores her, just like playing these little petty power games because he is a child. And a lot of times Groucho reminded me of that kind of petulance on a world stage, right?
Yeah, and I think
Yeah, but at least Groucho can finish his thoughts.
Yes, I mean,
Right.
I was saying also off mic that he's very eloquent, and it helps that he's played by Groucho Marx, right? He can string a sentence together. He can be clever. Trump can be funny, but he can't really be clever. Like, he doesn't do it with any sort of finesse of language, right?
Yeah, because I feel like Firefly is still likable in a way.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I thought he was. I thought he was pretty. I mean,
One big difference between
likable.
Groucho and Woody Allen, I think, is Woody Allen can do the Groucho stick, but make himself sympathetic at the same time. And I did not feel sympathy for Firefly at all. John, be our tiebreaker here.
I don't know. I never thought if he was likable or not, I guess.
You're just thinking whether or not he's funny.
I was thinking whether or not this bit works for me because I knew I was watching a movie and I knew that this was the Marx Brothers.
Yeah.
But I also, obviously, there is too many allusions to Trump with Firefly.
Which I wasn't expecting.
So pathetic.
Really wasn't expecting
that we
that.
can that you can like compare a very satirical non-politician to like our current president, which is pathetic.
And people in the critics that Zach was quoting at the top of the episode were saying like how outdated this is and
Right.
how like this take on politics is just too unbelievable to age well.
It
and
is
we have
very
come
real.
full circle, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, it is very real right now, and I think that's, I guess that's why I never thought if Firefly was likable. I was mainly focused on the comedy and whether the satire did hold up. Obviously, it very much does, because we're in America and we're living it right now. So, I think it is a successful political satire if you want to judge its relevance and its timelessness in kind of that realm of very popular political film satires of like Doctor Strangelove, Great Dictator, To Be or Not to Be. Like this
is a really good fourth feature in that.
Falls in that one for sure because it's different from all of those, but it still brings its point across.
And all four of those films are very different.
Yeah.
What do you think its point is? I mean, we can find parallels between Duck Soup and Trump, but in the 1930s when this is being made,
right?
What do you think the Marx Brothers are actually trying to say about politics? They would probably say they're not trying to say anything,
right?
Of course,
right?
But we as critics can find some sort of intent and interpretation here. So what do you think it actually is?
I think it's trying to shed light on the fact that politics is such sham is the wrong word, but such a superficial
It's show business
thing. Yeah, it is. It is very much show business, and the people who
with untalented people.
right, yeah. And so our politicians today are as much actors as people on film, and whether they're successful in their roles or not is a different story. But I think also the Marx Brothers are showing kind of how maybe fragile the political system is and has always been, and
how fragile the egos of politicians.
Yeah,
right?
It's like somehow the life of a politician attracts a very certain personality, and I think that's also what this is satirizing is that personality.
Though Groucho's character is really different from all the politicians around him.
Sure.
Right? There are a lot of just kind of faceless bureaucrats who seem like they're there to do their job. But he is this crazy bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's not necessarily saying something about politicians in general as much as it's saying about like this is a system in which someone like Groucho could easily find their way in and just totally destroy it from the inside.
Yeah.
Which may have seemed preposterous in the 1930s.
Right.
But we've kind of
Right.
gotten there now, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And also, I mean, this was 6 years before Hitler invaded Poland, and you know,
Right.
so many years before the World War II. So it's definitely a pre-World War II movie, where if this was post-World War II, this would have a very, very different, I think, production design, very different
Yeah.
jokes.
Chaplin probably would have done The Great Dictator differently if he would have known the full extent of the concentration camps.
Yes.
Right? Like, he knew they were a thing,
Yes.
but it was more of like a whispered
Yeah.
legend than the historical reality
Right.
that we're faced with now.
Because Great Dictator's 1940.
It's right on the
Right.
cusp of our knowledge of that stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting
Yeah.
to think of these certainly in the time that they were made, as you should as a film critic, but also as how they relate now, which is equally as interesting and worthwhile to discuss.
So overall, in this Young Critics Watch Old Movies series, we're kind of talking about how well these movies age for us and whether or not we enjoy them with so many years past. So what are our thoughts? I would give thumbs up to
Yeah.
Duck Soup.
Oh, yeah,
I
me
think
too.
that maybe it's not as perfect of a comedy as it could have been because of how much it relies on the dialogue.
Sure.
Right? And how your mileage is kind of going to vary depending on how many of the jokes you pick up or how many of them work for you. But I had a really good time with it.
Yeah.
Especially the musical numbers and especially some of the visual gags. So.
I think it's certainly one of these great kind of famous American films that if you haven't seen, it's certainly worthwhile to watch.
And not a hard watch.
No.
Either. Yeah, this
Only
is really easily digestible.
An hour and 9 minutes. Anyone can watch that.
It might be. I mean, I know that it is taught in a lot of intro film classes at University of Tennessee, and I can kind of understand why. It's a super accessible, super old movie. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this series, because I feel like this is not a movie that I would gravitate towards on my own. Like, I'm not really a political satire person. Like, I don't usually seek out those movies on my own, but I found this to be enjoyable, and I think other people should give it a chance also.
Zach, what do you think?
It's good.
All right.
Cool.
Bye, everybody.
And that was it.
That's the kind of hard-hitting film criticism that people tune in for.
Yeah.
It's good. It's very good.
Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be continuing our Young Critics series with 1931's Taboo, the last film for F.W. Murnau. So we will be going back 2 years. That was 1931. Compared to this in 1933.
Check out cinematary.com. We got a new review of Wonder Woman by Paige Taylor, who wasn't able to come on the podcast, but wrote a great write-up on that movie. And be ready in the next week or so for some video essays to drop. I'm doing one about Scarlett Johansson. In the works.
Boom.
Yeah, it's coming.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next